Thanks, Minister. First of all, I'm going to deal with the forestry section. What genius put in this, the forestry, the minus 8 million? There were less than 3,000 hectares, were actually not even at 2,500, is largely attributed to the fall off in the interest by farmers. Because we know the situation. You said 4,300 licences. The committee, in fairness to them, have found 4,700 licences. There's 2,700 of them. That a statement yesterday, which is actually like a goading statement that Minister Hack had put out yesterday, the 2,700 of them, there's no problem with them. So why aren't they issued is the first thing. And it's minus 8 million this year. But where are we going to achieve the targets in forestry that we are 50% since 2017 to 2020 down? There seems to be absolutely no direction. Minister, the one part of it you mentioned there was a court case. Let's go back to 2012 in your department. Up on its website in the forestry section, it states where the national parks wrote to them and made it very clear that they had to comply with the EU Habitats Directive. I wasn't even in politics at the time, and I knew about the 15-kilometre buffer zone. We knew about the NISs. We knew that you had to get appropriate assessments. And now, when people are flagging it, other politicians, including myself, have been flagging it for 3 to 4 years. This is getting worse by the day. It is, I find it very offensive for any committee that officials and a minister came in, not you, and said 1,900 licences. And when I gave the evidence to them, and actually I was 700 short, there's now 4,700. And what control or who's responsible in this department? And would you be concerned, Minister, if other information comes forward that at that committee we were informed things and that they end up not to be correct? Would you be concerned about that department then in relation to the forestry and going forward? Second of all, in relation to forestry, is there going to be a relook at some of the ground? Years ago, I remember Glen Hesh and Mayo, I cut timber in it years ago, and now you cannot plant it because the standard of the land is allegedly gone up. And then people cannot plant. The other thing on the biodiversity, Minister, and I don't know, is it your department or is it going to be the national parks, but they're talking about a 30 million 9-year scheme for biodiversity in the west, along the Atlantic or the Atlantic Way. What department is going to do that for 9 years is my understanding, and it's something like 30 million is being mooted at the moment. Will that, after 9 years, where do you go then? Can you go in with the digger and pull all the bushes, or are you going to be paid for after that? Because this could be a dangerous thing for farmers to go into if there isn't a longevity of this scheme. I welcome, in the line of BPS, I'll give the department credit. In fairness to them, they're pretty good at getting money out to farmers, and I have to be honest and say it straightforward, give credit where credit is due, or the likes of the ANC. One question I have, Minister, if there's a satellite inspection, or if there's a farmer getting say, if a Department of Agriculture inspector is going out to them, their grants are held up. So you're innocent, or you're guilty until proven innocent. Why don't we know that that person will be going next year and the year after and the year after? Why isn't there a system that if a month or 6 weeks before the payments are paid, that they get their money, there's always a clawback the following year or the next year? Why is the farmer guilty until proven innocent? Second of all, in forestry, and there's a big worry in this, Minister, that after 10, 12, 13, 14 years, or on your 15th year, they do an assessment of it. You could get a big bill that there might be a section, but when you multiply it by the number of years, should there not be a farm charter that says, in the first 3 years, if there isn't, and if the department hasn't found an error in the size of the parcels, well, after that, then tough luck, because you can't go back after 15 years to someone and say, well, now you owe us 10 grand or 5 grand. Do you know what I mean? We have to have some sort of a time limit on them things. In the line of the new reps that you've talked about, Minister, there's a lot of farmers out of AOS and there's farmers coming out of the schemes at the moment where, say, you're rolling over some of the schemes. Could you tell us when they're going to be rolled over and what the conditions, like if you had something these for 5 years, in the glass, I was trying to think what I made there, the glass scheme, if you were going to roll that over and you had, say, rivers in one part, but you were out of that land and you were moving to another part or another place, because obviously the leases are only for a certain length of time, will you be able to go into it to the new scheme or the rollover scheme, to put it simply? Look, at the TAMS has done a lot of good around this country, and I hope that it, Minister, that it continues, especially for the young farmers. And I concur with Deputy Carty in relation to the young students that are not alone going to the Chagas colleges, but also to the likes of the ETBs, the likes of Westport, the great work they do in delivering courses for young farmers. But they don't seem to have got the, or is there going to be the financial help for them in the line of, they're all online now. Is there financial help there for them, and even going into the future to keep encouraging youngsters into farming? In relation to the overseas programme, I know there's 23 million or something like that. Is that the last payment of that? I think 2023, but we brought forward a bit. Is that the last payment on that? How much money do you envisage will be for the farmers that have come out of AOS? I know that you're saying that glass farmers will be covered for another year or two. How much money will be made available, or how many farmers will be able to enter that scheme? What do you anticipate the average income to be on it, and what is the length of the scheme? Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Deputy Fitzmaurice. And first of all, in relation to, I responded to the Chairman and to Deputy Carthy already in relation to the forestry issue, and there's no doubt that the licensing backlog and licensing challenges have contributed to the reduction in forestry area planted. I think if you don't have a licensing system that's operating smoothly as well, and it has delays, it obviously acts as a disencouragement to applicants as well, and it doesn't. It's not something that makes it as attractive. So we have a lot of work to do. First of all, which we're working very hard on in relation to addressing the backlog that is there. And I outlined some of the measures. You're aware of the bill, Deputy, which all parties cooperated on a number of weeks ago. But we've significantly increased the number of ecologists within the department, from 2 whole-time equivalents this time last year to 16 now, and we're hiring more as well. And we're currently recruiting an additional 13 forestry inspectors, 10 of which will be working on licensing files, and that work is ongoing. And there's also been people moved temporarily as well, forestry inspectors, into to assist with licensing. And it is starting to. We're seeing an increase in licensing. We're seeing an increase in volume. We are in the last 2 or 3 months since the legislation went through. There's undoubtedly, Deputy, a crunch in supply within the sector, which is built up as a result of the backlog that was there, and that is causing massive challenges and difficulties for the sector, and there's no doubt about that. And I'm very, as is Minister Hackett, very conscious of that, and very conscious that every step that can be taken is taken within the department to address that. And I've outlined the staffing additions that are being put on it. I've also outlined the legislative changes that have been made, and the fact that that effort will continue. We've also seen the Forestry Appeals Committee subdivide to 4 separate subcommittees as well to increase their capacity. So across all of the areas that there needs to be action taken and resources allocated to, that is happening, and it will continue. We're now starting in the last couple of months, starting to see the volume in terms of licences being issued that is starting to work its way and will be starting to work its way into the system, and it needs to continue. But it doesn't take away from the fact that over the last number of months, volume has been decreasing, and we have seen a supply crunch, which is causing undoubted difficulty, and one that I want to see resolved, and will be doing, along with Minister Hackett, all I can to resolve it. Obviously, in relation to the pathway ahead, in relation to trying to improve afforestation in the years ahead and meet our targets and make it a more attractive proposition, addressing the backlog is part of that, but also then we have to work with farmers in terms of how we can incentivise and encourage people to look at forestry as something that can add to their enterprise and add to their income. And certainly in relation to the development of the new forestry plan, Deputy, and the new Common Agricultural Policy as well, I'd welcome your input and ideas in relation to how we can increase and improve afforestation levels from where they are at the moment, and see that increase significantly in the years ahead. In relation to payments, you rightly pointed out in relation to the payments, the importance of them being paid in time, and also the importance as well of trying to ensure that inspections, and satellite inspections in particular, don't impact them and see significant delays. That's something I want to work and prioritise as Minister too. Fortunately, this year we have seen the highest number of applicants paid ever. 99% of eligible farmers have now been paid, and that's a significant achievement, and one that reflects well on all of the staff involved in achieving that, and it is certainly something that I can assure you I will be working with the team to ensure continues to be a priority in the time ahead. In relation to the glass rollover, so we're currently engaged with the European Commission in relation to finalising and seeking approvals in relation to rolling it over for another year, and I am determined, Deputy, to ensure that it is as practical as possible, and that there's as little red tape as possible in relation to that rollover for farmers. I think for the 35,000 of the 48,000 farmers that are in glass and that were due to finish the 5th year of their scheme this month, it was really crucial that funding, the government prioritised that funding to support the scheme to continue in the budget, and it wasn't easily achieved, but as part of an overall 11% increase in funding for agriculture, that funding was secured, and for those in glass, they will be able to roll it over and into next year. And we're working on finalising the administrative arrangements around that at the moment. In relation to the new funding, the €79 million of additional funding for environmental measures which came in the budget, which hadn't been there previously, I'm currently assessing the types of measures that might be spent on, as well as the level of those funds that will be spent on the new pilot scheme, which will be for those targeted to those not currently in glass. So the number of applicants and the exact details around it are something that are currently being worked on and not finalised just yet, Deputy. And in relation to the new REP scheme then, and the figures around that again, the pilot scheme this incoming year will help inform the nature and content and objectives of the follow-on REP scheme, which people coming out of glass ultimately will transition into. And again, it's something I will be consulting and engaging widely with, including your own views and stakeholders' views in relation to, positive contributions and suggestions around how we can make that a scheme which delivers in terms of our environmental objectives, in terms of biodiversity, and in terms of contributing to climate change, while importantly working well for farmers and ensuring it delivers net income for farmers as well. And that would be really important. So, and I'd be very open to ideas around that. So, thanks, Deputy Fitzmaurice.
Minister, just on the TAMS, do you expect the full allocation of the money to be used up in the programme?
Yes, I do. Absolutely. And further spending in addition to that, Chairperson.
Okay.
There's, in the forestry, you talk about extra people, and yeah, there's extra people. But we haven't talked at all. There's 4,700 without the ones that's gone into appeals. It is stated yesterday on the statement that 2,700 of those have no problems. Why aren't they out for so many people?
The 2,700 of them don't require ecological input,
Correct,
Deputy, yeah. So the significant backlog has been in relation to those that need additional work because of the ecological requirements for those
Yeah, but
particular
why don't we get the
applications.
2,700 out?
So, yeah, so those 2,700 are being processed and being dealt with. We've seen 2,300 licences issued this year. Over the course of 2020, 2,300. So obviously, as licences are coming in, licences are going out, but there has been a backlog there. So while there's 4,700 on hand currently, 2,300 have been issued over the course of the 2020, but that needs to be more. It's ramping up. Volume is coming out and needs to continue to come out to address the supply crunch that is in the sector. And everything possible that can be done is being done to address that. Obviously, they all have to be processed in line with the law. It has to be robust processing. It has to be in line with policy and with all various requirements. So that's why the additional staff needed to be put in place, and why we have put them in place, and also why we introduced that legislation and sought the cooperation of the House to streamline and to fast track it because of the urgency of the situation. So we've had 2,300 issued in 2020. About 2,000 applications are with ecologists. 2,700, the other 2,700 are not requiring that additional ecological input, and therefore get processed. There's less involved in processing them, and they are being processed as well. But overall, whether they've an ecological input or whether they're in the other category, it's essential that we have the staffing and the team in place to be able to deal with them and drive down that backlog. And the immediate priority is getting volume into the sector to ensure that we address the supply crunch of wood and timber that's there at the moment.
You would have ramped up numbers massively, have you, looking after applications in the last 6 or 8 months, would that be fair to say?
Say that again, David?
In the last 6 to 8 months, you'd have ramped up the number of ecologists and the number of people.
Yeah.
Why then, in the dashboard that we get, the number of 3 felon licences for November 19 was more than November 20 if we have so many people doing it?
I think there has been, in terms of the big crunch at the moment is in relation to volume for felling. So
This is felon I'm talking about.
yeah. So what was the figure you gave me there again?
I said in November 19, I'm looking at the dashboard that
Yeah.
your department gives us, which is very helpful. And the number of felling licences issued in November 19, and there was less staff and there was less ecologists and less everything, is more than the number of licences issued in 2020, even with the heap extra staff, and that's unusual. This year we have less licences issued in November 2020, to put it simple, than 2019, even though we've ramped up the numbers of people by probably doubled it or tripled it, whatever.
Well, I don't have the figures here.
Well, I'm looking at them if you
Yeah.
want to see, like I have the
Yeah.
dashboard here in front of me.
But what I can say is, if you look at the output, Deputy, since the legislation passed, and since additional staff have come on board, and you look at where we were at throughout 2020 to where we've been the last couple of months, volume is starting to come out and ramp up again, and it needs to continue to ramp up. But I can assure you that in terms of those additional staff coming on board and more coming on board, that every effort has been made to address the licence applications that are there and to ensure that volume continues to come out. There's no doubt that the backlog and the delays led to a drying up of supply, and the immediate priority now is to replenish that supply in the short term and for next year as well.
Yeah, I would worry, Minister, because the week that the committee had your department in fairness, there was a real surge that week. There was 68 and 41 licences issued for felling to both Quilsha and the private sector. And funnily enough, since that, the figures have come down to 23, 24, 5, 21, 23, 14, and in the 30th it was the 51, 22. But that week had way higher. Like, if this isn't addressed, there is timber now coming in from other countries, and there's 2,700 licenses, and I cannot get my head around when a minister says that there's no problem with those, how they can't be processed straight away, and that we see on some figure on our dashboard in the next week or 10 days, that there'd be 1,000 licences put out if there's no problem with them.
Well, yeah, Chairperson.
But in fairness, the Minister hasn't these figures in front of him, David Fitzmaurice, and we came in to discuss the estimate. So if you could give a written reply to David Fitzmaurice.
I was just going to say that obviously, I mean, the notes I have here with me are around the estimate, which is not relevant to the forestry question, Deputy. So I don't have the dashboard in front of me at the moment to compare the figures that you have in front of yourself. But what I can be very clear on, and what I am very clear on, is that every effort is being made to address the supply crunch that's there and to address the issues in relation to volume and the backlog and licences. And I've outlined clearly how in relation to ecological resources and staff that has ramped up massively and continues to ramp up, how in relation to forestry inspectors that has ramped up significantly and continues to do so as well, how in relation to the Forestry Appeals Committee that has subdivided into 4 committees, whereas previously it was 1. And also in relation to the legislation which was brought through to streamline the licensing process, that is now in place too. There was obviously also over the course of the last year significant numbers of appeals in the system, which had increased over the course of the last year and a half too, that had dried up supply. But now as licences are coming in and as they're being issued, thankfully we are seeing some volume come in, but it doesn't take away from the fact that over recent months we've seen supply reduce out in the market, and that is causing at the moment real problems. But we're doing all we can and making every effort possible, as I've just outlined, to ensure that volume increases and to ensure that that over the month of December and into January that improves the situation further, and that we start to get on top of that backlog then, and start to drive it down and ensure that there is a more streamlined application process in terms of timelines for people who are making afforestation applications, because it is undoubtedly massively frustrating for all of those who are currently waiting on either their felling licence, their afforestation or thinning or road opening licence.